Yes.
And it occurred to me that there is that significant document which deliberately does not mention God's name, and that is the Israel Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
And it could well have been that there was a certain amount of prescience by deciding to leave it out, because they could easily have foreseen how in the wrong hands, like some of our cousins, they might take the Declaration of Independence with God's name in it and just rip it up.
Yes, yes.
And so they left it out.
Yeah.
And instead there is a compromise. God is referred to under the name of Shiur Yisrael.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's why they didn't refer to God's name.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I thought there was an ideological objection.
Yeah,
yes.
Do you know, Charles, that you've got that, documented, and that's the reason why the name of God?
No, I don't have it documented. It's just a surmise. The alternative is that there was this dispute between the religious element and the secular element, with the religious wanting to have in a proper reference to Hashem and the secularists wanting no reference. So that they went to Ben Gurion, and he came up with the compromise of referring to Hashem as Shiur Yisrael. And that's why we have that formulation.
And again, you've got that again documented or whatever, or again, that's
I
a
heard
suggestion.
that from the late Aryeh Handler, who was there at the reading of the Declaration of Independence, and he had it on good authority from the drafting committee.
Yeah, that's good. Benji, you know how we could follow that with our uncle Solomon Jacobowitz, the historian, amongst everything else. He would for sure know. So maybe that's something we can, if we try and remember, to ask him next time. He would. Do you know our uncle Shlomo Jacobowitz? That's my father-in-law's brother, living in Eretz Yisrael. A historian amongst other things, and that's certainly something he would, I think, have a view on. So that's a good point.
David Cohen, did you have a reason?
Sorry, did I have a reason for saying that it was an ideological thing?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I think I read it, but I also actually heard Rabbi Kimchi say that when he says the word Shiur Yisrael in the davening before the Amidah, he likes it with the kavanah of the importance of compromise, which he connects to the fact that those words were used in the declaration by way of a compromise.
Oh, so you're saying it was there as a compromise?
Well, that's what Rabbi Kimchi certainly understood to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I heard the same thing, David, from Rabbi Kimchi.
Oh, good.
Right. I said to you, so that's super interesting. Yeah, no, perhaps that is something we can try and follow up. Thank you for raising that, Charles. We're up to do your test on Amud Aleph, but I would just a quick summary where we're up to here. We were dealing with fast days, and one thing led on to another, as it does with the Gemara, which is so wonderful, because as you see, it's all Torah Sheba'al Peh, and the discussion you can see moved from one to the other. So we were actually looking, I know it's not one of the attachments today, but it was from last week. If you remember, the Machlokes whether Botla Megillas Tanis. What does that mean? Remember, there was a whole listing called Megillas Tanis. Actually, Peter, you may want to put people on mute just to make sure there's no background. Thank you. But people come off mute by all means. Yes, there was a Machlokes whether Botla Megillas Tanis. What does that mean? We've got this listing of days, happy days. Now, they are semi-Yom Tovim. Normally, when events happen, miraculous events happen, there was a Yeshua salvation for Klal Yisrael. whatever it happened to be, certain reasons, and we've listed a couple of them. In fact, in that list, of course, is Hanukkah and Purim. Perhaps you'd say they're right on top, but it's an interesting list. Hanukkah and Purim and such dates, other dates similar to them. Of course, Hanukkah and Purim have mitzvahs attached to them too. But anyway, there's Megillas Tanis. It was a listing when days where it was forbidden, you'd look on those days and say, no fasting on that day, no Hespedim on that day, maybe, they're happier days. And therefore, yeah, it could have differences. For example, if the community wanted to have a fast day for whatever, could be a plague or they would certainly look at those dates and say, no, those are special days in the calendar. Now, the question is, what happened post destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash? Are those days now gone? In other words, there's no special reason why they should be. If you put people on mute, good. Yeah. Are those days now gone? In other words, those days are available for fasting? Or do we say, no, those days are still happy days? The only days that have gone from the calendar and are no longer happy days are those days linked to the Beis Hamikdash. What do I mean by that? Because there were certain days which originally were fast days with the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. When the second Beis Hamikdash was built, or the Beis Hamikdash was rebuilt, those days became Yomim Tovim. So those fast days, Tisha B'Av, for example, Shiva B'Tammuz became a happy day when the Beis Hamikdash was rebuilt. Now, with the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, those days, Tisha B'Av, for example, becomes a fast day. But the other days, which are not linked to the Beis Hamikdash, remain semi-holidays. Right? So again, a machlokas we saw last week, and we haven't concluded this machlokas yet. We're trying to prove, do we say that listing is gone now? There's no Beis Hamikdash. There are no semi-Yom Tovim. I remember one of the questions we asked last week was, well, Hanukkah, people, we still keep Hanukkah, it's a happy day, and there's no fasting allowed on Hanukkah. And the answer we gave, well, Hanukkah maybe is an exception. But what about the rest of the list? Because Hanukkah, there's publicity, the fact that you have your Hanukkah lights, you can say the same with Purim. So again, do we say those dates where it's forbidden to fast? That's what it says in this Megillah. It's called Megillas Tanis, those dates where forbidden to fast. Do we say now, no, it's no longer forbidden to fast, you can if you want to, it's no longer a semi-holiday because the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed? Or do you say, no, those days are still semi-holidays? Anything linked, sadly, to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, those days are no longer happy days. You with me? But in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, clearly, not only those days mentioned in Megillas Tanis were happy days. Similarly, that whole listing, whether you talk about Tisha B'Av, Shiva B'Tammuz, they were all happy days because the Beis Hamikdash was rebuilt. Now, what we were talking about last week was that, if you remember, we're talking about the fact that the rabbis managed to push through the fact that documents no longer had God's name in them. People were so excited that in fact it was forbidden to publicly mention God's name, and when that was overturned at the time of the Hashmonaim, it seems, therefore they made people were so excited they started including the name of God wherever they could, because they could do this publicly now. It was certainly not against the rules. So when the rabbis thought that this actually went too far, if you remember, and people started just in their normal financial documents, loans, etc., would put the name, the year, and they would talk about a Kohen Gadol to the God on high. They would mention his name, mention God's name, and the rabbis were not happy with that, as we said before. because maybe what would happen to the document once the loan is repaid, that document would just be slung out. And therefore the rabbis didn't want the name of God to be mentioned in documents. And we spoke about that with the Tshuva of Rav Moshe, etc. And it became another date included in that list of semi-Yom Tovim, right? So the Gemara asked and said, what is the point of including you? Now, remember, back to this machlokas. If Botla Megillas Tanis, which means that there are no semi-Yom Tovim anymore besides Chanukah and Purim, what is the point of adding another date? And the Gemara said, no. Maybe Botla Megillas Tanis. But when they included that date, the Beis HaMikdash was still in existence, as it was, as we know, with the after the Maccabees, after the Hashmonaim, the Beis HaMikdash was still there for a couple of 100 years. That's when this ruling came into play. So what did they do? If you remember, it was on the 3rd of Tishri, and they made it a Yom Tov, a semi-Yom Tov. Okay? So the Gemara is saying, how could they make a semi-Yom Tov on the 3rd of Tishri? Just a minute. If you're making an extra Yom Tov, it must be that they were including this according to the view that says Botla Megillas Tanis, then they are including it, and it happened when the Beis HaMikdash was still in existence, right? Again, if we've got a date included, which is the 3rd of Tishri, and we'll get to Tzom Gedalia in a moment, it looks like the fact that we're including later dates, it seems that where when the rabbis got through this idea of not including the name of God in documents. Now, that sounds like Lo Botla Megillas Tanis, because we can see they're even adding new ones. Says the Gemara, no, that's not such a new addition to that Megillah. That was included at the time when it was happy days all round, because the Beis HaMikdash was still here. It's true. I hold one of the views that Botla Megillas Tanis, but that's not a proof that Lo Botla Megillas Tanis. You're with me again. We've got a new date in there, the 3rd of Tishri. So the Gemara's suggestion is it sounds like Lo Botla Megillas Tanis. That's why we're adding new dates. Says the Gemara, no. Even according to the view that Botla Megillas Tanis, this addition came into force when there was still a Beis HaMikdash. So that doesn't disprove my view of Botla Megillas Tanis. You with me? You can still rely on the view, subscribe to the view that Botla Megillas Tanis, and nevertheless, this date, the 3rd of Tishri, can be included in that list because it wasn't included later on. It was included when the Beis HaMikdash was still in existence. And even the view that holds Botla Megillas Tanis does hold that at the time when the Beis HaMikdash was still there, of course, all those dates were applicable. With me? So what we're saying now, it sounds like that is not a proof one way or the other. You could include the 3rd of Tishri and you could still say either Lo Botla Megillas Tanis, and that's why new dates are included, or maybe Botla Megillas Tanis, but that date was included when the Beis HaMikdash was still in existence. Okay, now we pick it up at Yud Tes Amud Aleph. Top line. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute. The Tapukle, you can ask, just 1 minute. Do you remember Tzom Gedalia? Tzom Gedalia was, remember, it was the event when Gedalia was killed. He was acting as the officer, if you like, looking after the rest of the remnant of Klal Yisrael after the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And when he was actually killed, Then, of course, the real downfall for the remainder of Klal Yisrael, he was basically assassinated. When he was assassinated, then really a downfall for Klal Yisrael, and it ended up being a fast. Now, if we are talking about a time when the Beis HaMikdash was still in existence, what happened? All those fast days became semi-Yom Tovim at the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So again, we wanted to say that maybe you could still subscribe to the view of Botla Megillas Tanis, but you know why they made this extra date on the 3rd of Tishri? It was because it was still during the time when the Beis HaMikdash was in existence. Says the Gemara, if the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, the 3rd of Tishri itself would have been a semi-Yom Tov, because all those fast days, Tisha B'Av, Asera B'Teves, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Tzom Gedalia, all those dates, which were sad days with the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, end up being, as we saw this posuk in Zechariah, a happy day. In which case, you don't need to include in Megillas Tanis the 3rd of Tishri as a new date of a semi-Yom Tov. It's already a semi-Yom Tov. You with me? But typically, the Havale Yom Shenerek Bo Gedalia V'Nachikam. Have a look at Rashi. But typically, you can ask, Im Beis HaMikdash Havakayim, if the Beis HaMikdash is still in existence, Belav Hochi, without incorporating this date, 3rd of Tishri, to make it a semi-Yom Tov, Havi Yom Tov, it would be a Yom Tov. Why? Tahainu Tzom Gedalia. It's Tzom Gedalia which has been converted V'karye Rachmona Moyadim Tovim Bizman Habayis. Do you remember that posuk? We spoke about that posuk becoming Yomim Tovim. The Sosoin and the Simchon Moyadim Tovim, the posuk in Zechariah. So, in other words, the Gemara is coming back and says it makes no sense to say that this date, the 3rd of Tishri, was included when the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, the second Beis HaMikdash, because if that is the case, it would already have been a semi-Yom Tov, a conversion of Tzom Gedalia, remember? Tzom Gedalia was a fast after the first Beis HaMikdash. Sorry, Peter, back on, put people on.
No, but I want to ask a question. No,
oh, sorry, unless there's a question coming through. Yes. Yes, no, that's fine.
So when this bottom again says it wasn't just an absence of not going to fast, it was a positive reintroduction of a semi-Yom Tov. So it went from completely negative to completely positive, so to speak, if you're with me. It wasn't just that you eliminated them as fast days. You subscribed to them as a Yom Tov.
Absolutely. That was a posuk we mentioned last week.
But what was the Yom Tov that Tzom Gedalia that was on the 3rd? What are you celebrating on the 3rd of Tishri?
You're celebrating that it's true. At the time when Gedalia was assassinated, it was terrible for the rest of Klal Yisrael. But Baruch Hashem, we've got over that because we now got rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. I mean, it's happy days.
Okay.
Although, and that we saw right at the top. Have a look at, if you've got it still, Yud Ches on the base. You probably got your old Vilna Shas there. And if you look at Yud Ches on the base, Yud Ches on the base that we used last week, right on top, second line down, and it's a posuk from Zechariah, Ko Amar Hashem Tzavokos, Tzom Ravi, V'Tzom Chamishi, V'Tzom Shavi, V'Tzom Asiri, Yeh LeBeis Yehuda LeSosoin UleSimcha. And the posuk continues. Those people have got the posuk around the side from last week. Ulamoyadim tovim. So you're quite right. They convert from being a fast, not just becoming neutral, not a fast. They end up being a happy day. Now, if they are therefore a happy day, how can you tell me, going now to Megillas Tanis, that the 3rd of Tishri was included as another semi-Yom Tov? It is already a semi-Yom Tov. You with me? Second line down to where we are today in Yud Tes Amud Aleph. So the Gemara is now saying you cannot say that the 3rd of Tishri was included when there was a Beis HaMikdash. It could only have been included subsequently. And if it's included subsequently, of course, that's a proof that lo botla Megillas Tanis, because you're adding extra days. Says the Gemara, no. In fact, botla Megillas Tanis. And this date, the 3rd of Tishri, was included in this list. You'll tell me just 1 minute, isn't it already a semi-Yom Tov because of the conversion of Tzom Gedalia? Omar Rav, have you got it? Second line down in the Gemara. Omar Rav, some people say it's Rava. Omar Rav, Lo nitzurcha ela lesa es shelafonov. What Megillas Tanis did, Megillas Tanis, all those dates that are there, it's not just the date themselves where a fast is forbidden, it's the day before and the day after. So by incorporating, very interesting, we'll talk about the difference in a minute between normal fasts and the dates that are in there, these semi-Yom Tovim. To boost this semi-Yom Tov, have a look at Rashi, 3rd line down. Lo nitzracha, you know why it's mentioned in Megillas Tanis. It's mentioned again. Lo nitzracha hoda kovua b'Megillas Tanis. The fact that it's been included almost like a second time in Megillas Tanis, al dover for this matter. You remember what the rabbis were so happy. Ela lesa es yom esmael, to make the day before a date forbidden for fasting. Gam hu batanis, that's also forbidden for fasting. Kudromin and lekamei, the Gemara will tell us in just a moment. We remember the word lekamei, a good grammatical point here or vocabulary point, not lekamon later on. Lekamei is normally very soon, very close to this Gemara. In other words, in fact, it is coming up in a couple of lines, but Rashi is already telling us now, Hayomim ho'ele haksubim b'Megillah, those dates that are included in the Megillah, heim ulifneim uleachreim asurim. So the reason why it was incorporated, it may well have already been a semi-Yom Tov at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, because Tzom Gedalia is no longer relevant. They're very happy. Things have been changed, and now it's a happy day. But if it's included in Megillas Tanis, it means not just that day is forbidden to fast. It's such a happy day, although it's only a semi-Yom Tov, the day before and the day after will be forbidden in fasting. Says Gemara, 1 minute. What are you telling me that for? It's coming to tell me that the day before, you mentioned, Lesra Eshelafonov, the day before will become forbidden. No, don't mention the day before. Shelafonov nami teipekle the habiyom shel acha rosh chodesh. The second day, interesting, lots of things we can talk about here. The second day of Tishri is a second day of the month. What's special about second days of the month? Besides writing the number 2, the second day of the month is the day after Rosh Chodesh, every month. Now, it's true, there'll be something special for Tishri. In many places, the second day, it will be the second day Rosh Hashanah. Even in the days when they only had 1 day Rosh Hashanah in Yerushalayim, and that's a separate piece, it will be the day after Rosh Hashanah. But this number 2 is very important in the calendar. Why? Because number 2 is always, don't have to be, as I say, a rocket scientist. Number 2 is after number 1. And being after the one, yeah, Peter agrees with me there. Number 2 is after number 1, and number 1 is a Rosh Chodesh. So if you've got Rosh Chodesh mentioned there, the next day is going to be the day after Rosh Chodesh, which will also be forbidden for fasting. Have a look at Rashi here. Rosh Chodesh, interesting. Well, hold on a minute. That Rashi will help us in 1 minute. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute, where are we up to? The Gemara is saying that you know why the 3rd of Tishri is mentioned, so that the 2nd of Tishri will also be forbidden to fast. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute. Number 2 is the day after Rosh Chodesh. So that will be forbidden to fast anyway. So what have you gained by writing the 3rd of Tishri in the Megillah? You're not gaining anything from the day before. Answer Gemara, yes, you are. You're gaining from the day before as well. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh d'oraisa. What do you mean Rosh Chodesh d'oraisa? Have a look at Rashi. Rosh Chodesh is a moyed d'oraisa. It's a Yom Tov min haTorah, a semi Yom Tov. Rosh Chodesh is a semi Yom Tov min haTorah. So what? Keep going. U'doraisa lo boi chizuk. The whole point of making the day before or the day after also forbidden is to boost that day, in this case, the 3rd of Tishri. Rosh Chodesh, which is a Yom Tov, a semi-Yom Tov, min haTorah, doesn't need a boost. Have a look at Rashi. If it's min haTorah, Rosh Chodesh is a semi-Yom Tov, min haTorah, it doesn't need any chizuk. And therefore, the 2nd of Tishri, or the 2nd of any month, would not, it could be Rosh Hashanah, but it would not be a day forbidden for fasting, being the day after Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh doesn't need a boost. Look at Rashi here. Something which is a Yom Tov min haTorah doesn't need to be strengthened. What do you mean strengthened? Look at the Rashi here. 3rd narrow line down of Rashi. If you've got a Yom Tov, even a semi-Yom Tov min haTorah, everybody knows about Rosh Chodesh, and therefore, and of course it's forbidden to fast on that day, it's a semi-Yom. You don't need to boost it by having the day before, the day after. Rashi says, Rashi le'esolafon of lachrov, av yemei Megillas Tanis. If something's mentioned in Megillas Tanis, which is only the Rabbanon instituting an extra happy day, utzrichin chizuk, they needed extra strengthening, ki heichid lo leisi lisanis b'yom tov atzmo, so that you shouldn't belittle the Yom Tov itself. They strengthened it the day before and the day after. So what are we saying here? The reason why this is Megillas mentioned in Megillas Tanis is to say that also the 2nd, even if it wasn't going to be Yom Tov, 2nd will also be forbidden to fast. Look at the Gemara, and then we'll come back to this Rosh Chodesh point in a moment, and we'll need your skills in a minute, Peter. So finger on the button, please. Desanya hayomim ha'eleh. Those days, have you got it in the Gemara? 6 lines down. Haksuvim b'Megillas Tanis. Any dates mentioned in Megillas Tanis, Asurim are forbidden, Bein Lifneim, Bein Lachreim, whether the day before or the day after. Shabbosos v'Yomim Tovim, a Shabbos and a Yom Tov, and even Rosh Chodesh, which is a semi-Yom Tov min haTorah, Heim Asurim Lifneim Lachreim. We never say that Sundays and Fridays are off limits for fasting. There could be other reasons, but not just because it's the day before Shabbos. You might want to fast, or you might want to fast the day after because you put a bit of weight, but that's a separate point. Mutorim. Ma hefresh, says the Gemara, bein zeh lezeh. What's the difference? Halolu divrei Torah. Ve'ein divrei Torah tzrichin chizuk. They don't need strengthening. Halolu divrei sofrim. Other things which are only Midivrei Sofrim, it means the rabbis, the scribes have included those. It's called Sofrim here because it's in a Megillah anyway. V'divrei Sofrim Surichim Chizuk. They do need extra strength. A very interesting point. Something which is min ha-Torah doesn't need to be strength. Everybody knows it. Something which is midrabanon and you want to add some weight to it, you'd say the day before and the day after. Now, if I can ask you, Peter, onto Safaria, if we can go into the tour. So go to Halacha, if you can bring up on the screen, please. Thank you. Go to Halacha. Thank you. And yes, go down to Tur. Actually, it's worth seeing that before. Yeah, have a quick look on the side. The Tur, also known as the Abar. Oh no, press again, Tur. Yeah, on the side, on the right-hand side, it gives you a few bits about the Tur. We know about the Tur, 14th century, Kobaru Yaakov ben Osher. And of course, he was the son of the Rosh. Traces Jewish law from the Bible through the Talmud. It's really a codifying, if you like. Citing all opinions and dissenting opinions. The work is divided into 4 sections. Many commentaries written on them. Right, okay. Now, if you can now press on the Tur, go up to the Tur, a bit higher, up to the Tur, press, and go for the Orach Chaim. It's split into 4 areas. And if you can go to 417, see what we've got there. Now, you can press I don't think you're going to find it in English, even if you press on top. No, sadly not. It's only going to be in here. Now, the bit I want to show you, come down. Sorry, can I keep on the 417, just with your arrow. What's special about Rosh Chodesh? I go down to where Bittel. Actually, maybe we'll come back to this. If you can go down, drop down a bit to 419. Sorry, let's go to the end of 417 again. I'm sorry, darting around a bit. Oh yeah, here we are. That's very good. When it says min hoga, that's it. Next word. This is he's bringing from Isa Perek Mem Dalet, chapter 44 of Pirkei Rab Lezer. Pirkei Rab Lezer, go back to the Tana, the great Tana Rab Lezer. He's got, it's like a parokim that he put together, like Mishnayos. Wow. If you look at the Psukim, when they were asked to build the golden calf, of course they were looking for gold. The men expecting to go to the ladies refused. You can see the psukim there. The ladies did not give their gold and silver. The men had to take any gold and silver, or gold in particular, they had themselves. The ladies refused to give their gold. Lokach, you can be medayik that, you can see that in the posuk. Lokach noson lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu schoron shei meshamros Rosh Chodesh yosem ha'anoshim. And there's some people actually do have a minhag that ladies have a bit of a extra holiday, maybe from some of the work on Rosh Chodesh. For Shomati, this is very interesting. May ochi hori tam ladova. I heard from my brother a reason. Lefi, next line. Shahamadim niskanu. Of course, they're mentioned in the Torah, but where do they really go back to? Keneged Ovos. Each one, Keneged, really, Niskan, Keneged Ovos, because of the forefathers. In other words, the forefathers linked to 3 of those Yom Tovim. Pesach, Keneged Avraham. Why? Lushi Vasi Ugois. Remember, it talks about the matzahs that Lot made in Vayera, actually. That was last week's Sedra. And Pesach Hoya. Shavuos is connected, corresponds to Yitzchak. Why Shavuos? Shetkias Shofar Shematan Torah. We talk about the shofar, going back to the shofar of the ram of Yitzchak, being prepared to be sacrificed. Ultimately, it was a ram that was offered up, and you've got that ram's horn linking up to Tkir Shofar. So Yitzchak is linking to Shavuos. Shavuos is the time of Matan Torah. Sukkos is Keneged Yaakov. The Chsivul Mikneu Oso Sukkos coming up later on. We talk about the word Sukkos actually. That's setting up the booth. The first time you find that is with reference to Yaakov. Now this is interesting. The Yud Beis Roshei Chodshei Hashana, and the 12 months of the year, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Shegam Heim Nikroi Moedim. They're also called a Moed. Where do you see they're called a Moed? Because it's actually, remember there's a pasuk. It says it links the Yomim Tovim to Rosh Chodesh. Of Yom Simchaschem, of Moadechem, of Roshei Chodshechem. They're linked together. Uskartem b'chatzos. You're blowing the trumpets in the time of the Mishkan, the time of the Beis Hamikdash. That's a pasuk in the Torah of Yom Simchaschem, Moadechem, of Roshei Chodshechem. Roshei Chodshechem being linked. It's a Yom Tov. So where do you get the 12 Yomim Tovim? Says the Torah, Keneged Yud Beis Shvatim. Because of the 12 tribes, second line up there, because of the 12 tribes, that's why there are 12 Roshei Chodoshim. And of course, because of that, that's why they're a semi-Yom Tov. When they sinned at the time of the Egel, Nitlu men, they were taken from the whole tribe, the Nitlu Linashoseem. It's the ladies that really, if there is it's a semi-Yom Tov for everybody, but in particular, it's given over to the ladies because they weren't involved in that Avera. Very interesting. If you can go back, Peter, and go back on, just press the cross maybe there.
No, but can I just ask something on that? Sorry,
yes.
Can I just ask something? So that's it's a slightly Kabbalistic idea. So the idea that Pesach is for
yes,
Abraham and
yes,
all
yes,
so
yes.
You have to. It's not a sort of literal sort of.
No, I mean you've really, of course, you got it straight in the Torah, but we're saying Keneged, the first mention really, the linking is with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, absolutely. And then we're saying the actual Rosh Chodesh being a semi-Yom Tov, linked to all the Shvatim, but taken away and given over to the ladies. Yes, you're quite right. Have a look at the halacha one again. This time,
is it accepted? Sorry, is it accepted that the women didn't have a part in the Chet Egel? Didn't they volunteer their jewelry and their...
No, sir. Let's have a look. Oh, if we could pick that up as well, if you like. Have a look. Go to Tanakh then.
I take your word for it, but yeah.
Oh well, okay. We can find the psukim. We'll have to find it. That may take to find the pasuk in Exodus. Where should we go for? Try 30. Go to 30, Victor of Keturah's. Go back to 29. I should have a chumash. I haven't got a chumash right next to me, I'm afraid. Oh, there we go. Kisas. No. Scroll back. You did well there. Go back to 29. Beginning of 29. No, they go to 31, please. Only to keep our friend happy. Ah. Right, keep scrolling on, scrolling. Keep scrolling. You're in the right place. Keep going. A bit quicker if you can. Keep going. Oh, that's it. We're there. Vayomer Aaron, there is Pasuk 2. Have a look at Rashi, commentary Rashi there. Commentary down. Rashi. Go to the Hebrew one, or we can go to the English as well, it doesn't matter. Notice it said take it from the ladies. Right? Porku is the word take off the gold rings from the ladies. And then the next pasuk says, Vayisporku kol ha'om. The people took themselves off the nizmeh. You can see that. Have a look at Rashi there. Go back to the previous Rashi, previous pasuk, and the Rashi thereon. Yeah, right now the Rashi. Yes, Omar Aaron Belibo Hanoshim Ayodim Chosim Al Tach. They won't give their Shema Yisaki Vadov. So give a Vaheim Loim Tinu Uporku Me Alatzman. Turn to the English, please, Peter. Aaron said himself, women and the children have a love for their ornaments. Perhaps the matter will be delayed. That was the whole point of Aaron's doing this. In the meantime, Moshe will arrive. They, the men, did not wait until the midnight children of the night. That's why you've got the next passage. It doesn't say from the ladies at all. Vayisporku, the people themselves removed from themselves. That's what Rashi is picking up there. But they took the ornaments off themselves. They took off the pendants which were on their ears. There's no reference to pendants belonging to the women. And that seems to be the pshat, that the ladies weren't involved, quite the contrary. But go now back, please, to the X. No, we're going to the X now. Go back to Halacha. Go this time to Shulchan Aruch. Go to Orach Chaim. Go to 419. It's in Shulchan Aruch. Fascinating. Go to one above. For you on 420. 49. Press the Hebrew. 49. There on top. Yeah. Go for it. Oh, you're not in 419 yet, are you? Come down. You have to scroll a bit more. There you go. Now go to the Hebrew and English. Yes. Can we have it in Hebrew and English? Yes, we can. Scroll down to 419 now. There you are. That is the whole of chapter 419 in the Shulchan Aruch. And I think you'll be struggling to find a shorter chapter in Shulchan Aruch anywhere. Look at that wonderful halacha. Mitzvah lahabos besudas Rosh Chodesh. A mitzvah to feast on, to feast a lot. Lahabos besuda, in other words, yeah, as a literal translation, there's a mitzvah to have something extra for Rosh Chodesh. It becomes a semi-yontav, as we said before. And of course, you know all about the Hallel, etc. So I just wanted to point that out, that very short Siman in Shulchan Aruch. So if ever you're you decide to divide up the Shulchan Aruch and study a chapter each, if you want a short halacha, you've got Siman 419 for you. Mitzvah lahabos. A lot of commentaries on it, but we don't need that for the moment. So yes, back to our Gemara, if we can. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Peter. So what are we saying? We're saying, therefore, the fact that it's mentioned in Megillas Tanis means it's not a biblical Semi-Yom Tov, as Rosh Chodesh is, linked in that posuk as it is of Yom Simchaschem, of Moadechem, of Rosh Chodshechem, Uskatim Machatzos, blowing the trumpets, and the fact that the posuk links it with the other Yom Tovim. Therefore, that's why it's mentioned in Megillas Tanis. Says the Gemara. Just 1 minute. What are we saying? The point of writing it in Megillas Tanis is so that the day before will now give it extra strength, and that will also become a forbidden in fasting because it's the day before. But 1 minute, if this is at the time when the Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt, it means that Tzom Gedalia itself now becomes a Semi-Yom Tov, right? Everything, we explained this posuk in Zechariah, all the fast days that were there after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash ended up being Semi-Yom Tovim when the second Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt. Now, if that's the case, says the Gemara, and we're trying to see if the thread of Botla Megillas Tanis works. And we're saying, yes, Botla Megillas Tanis, which means all those dates, those Semi-Yom Tovim, are out once the second Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. When the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, this extra date, the 3rd of Tishri, appeared on the scene because, remember about the documentation, not including God's name, they were very excited about that, and it became a Semi-Yom Tov. And the point of putting it in Megillas Tanis is that the day before, that means the second, will also become forbidden in fasting. Why wouldn't it be forbidden? Because it's the day after the first? Because that's biblical. Biblical, there's no extra day. It says the Gemara, just 1 minute. The fact that Tzom Gedalia is now no longer a fast means it's a happy day. What does that mean? What will happen to the 2nd of Tishri now? Look at the Gemara. For taper clay, you can still ask, beginning line is lay, it's still the day before Tzom Gedalia becoming a happy day. With me? So in other words, that's not in the Torah. As that's not in the Torah, what will happen now? Because Tzom Gedalia becomes a happy day, it means that the day prior to it will also be forbidden in fasting. It's not in the Torah. The fast of Tzom Gedalia and now the Semi-Yom Tov of Tzom Gedalia is not mentioned in the Torah. It's not like Rosh Chodesh. In which case, Tzom Gedalia itself, if we're talking about the time of the second Beis HaMikdash being in existence, that day itself is not biblical Semi-Yom Tov, in which case the day before will also actually be forbidden. Remember, there's extra chizuk given. With me? In which case there's no point also writing the 3rd of Tishri in this list. Answers Gemara or Rav Ashi, just 1 minute. I know it's not biblical, but what is it? Gedalia ben Achikam Divrei Kabbalah. Oh, this is mentioned. It's called Divrei Kabbalah. It's the Nevi'im. It's, remember, Zechariah was the one, the prophets. It's true. It's not from the actual Torah itself, but it's still part of Tanakh. It's Divrei Kabbalah. We could talk about Divrei Kabbalah, those items which are part of Tanakh but not part of the Torah. Therefore, the fact that Tzom Gedalia was converted from a fast into a Semi-Yom Tov meant it will now have the power. Continue the Gemara. But Achikam Divrei Kabbalah over Divrei Kabbalah.
Can I ask you something?
Hold on. The Divrei Kabbalah Kedivrei Torah Domi, and they are both the same. In which case, the fact that it's Tzom Gedalia and it's been converted into a Semi-Yom Tov, the day before will not be forbidden in fasting. But if you now put this new date, the 3rd of Tishri, in the listing of Megillas Tanis, because it was a very happy day about the documentation, etc., which is post-biblical, it's post-Tanakh, that needs extra chizuk. And therefore, that's why it appears in Megillas Tanis. Why does it appear in Megillas Tanis? It's there during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash being in existence, so that the day before and the day after will also be forbidden. So therefore, where are we up to the moment? I will come back to you in a minute, Mervyn. Where are we up to at the moment? We are therefore left high and dry, really. We have no proof either way. Was Megillas Tanis botel or not? Nowadays, are the other dates mentioned in Megillas Tanis still forbidden for fasting or not? You could say, some people say botlo Megillas Tanis. Other people say lo botlo Megillas Tanis. They continue on as happy days. And this was another date that was included. But you could learn botlo Megillas Tanis. So why was this date included? It was included during the time when the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, and it gave it extra strength. We needed to be mentioned there, because otherwise, just the fact that Tzom Gedalia has been converted into a happy day, that wouldn't mean that the day before and the day after would also have been forbidden. So it's given it extra strength. Okay? So therefore, at the moment, we have not proved either way whether botlo Megillas Tanis or not. Mervyn's question.
So yeah, I'm just slightly puzzled by about converting Tzom Gedalia, unless you say it's really because of the documentation. I mean, it's one thing to say when the temple's resurrected, you don't have shows of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av are no longer sad days. But I mean, Tzom Gedalia is still being killed. I mean, he's not been resurrected.
No, agreed.
So
If sad, it's very sad. It's an assassination, but it doesn't warrant the whole of Klal Yisrael fasting. What it means, though, there too, you're right. There's the personal tragedy that he was just assassinated. I wouldn't say just, he was assassinated. But what we're saying is, because of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, anything linked to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash becomes a happy day. So much so that it's Zachariah himself in that pasuk we quoted Yud Ches on the base. All those days that are linked, just to show that the Beis HaMikdash has come back, they become happy days. We were fasting. Why were we fasting on that day? It's true, of course, he was assassinated, but that's not the reason why we're fasting. We're fasting because it was the demise of Klal Yisrael, the remnant left in Eretz Yisrael, and that's all behind us. We are very pleased. Thank you, Hashem, for the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. We're just saying it's changed. But of course, you're right. There's still the personal tragedy. But a very valid point. We needed Zachariah the Novi to say that what's wanted is those days are going to be transferred and transformed into happy days. You're right. You could have just said no longer fasting, but just to get the point across, the gratitude we have that we now have the Beis HaMikdash back, all those days that were sad, hafoch lonu, of a nafoch really, into happy days. But I see your point. Of course, it's sort of tragedy. He was assassinated. But you've got the Novi telling us that days linked. Why are we all fasting? We're fasting because it was the ending of Klal Yisrael. As I say, the leftovers in Eretz Yisrael, that's all behind us. We've got the Beis HaMikdash back. Yeah? That's, I think, what we'll say from Zachariah. Okay? Thank you. Right, we've now got to another question coming up, and we haven't got time for it today. I will point out this, though, for you. Peter, a very quick ending. If we can go back to, this time, go to Tanakh. The Gemara now will raise another question, and we won't be able to complete it, so we won't. Go back to, press the X on the X, Tanakh. Go back to Genesis. Let's have a look. Let's have a look around 26. Oh, no, go down to Torah portions. That's the way to do it. Go down to Torah portions. We should have done this before, of course. Go down to this week's Seder Chayisora. Thank you very much. Chayisora. Now go drop down. We want actually the next chapter. A very interesting point there. Hidden away. Remember, Eliezer sent to try and find a match for Yitzchak. Keep going. And what eventually does he give Rivka? Oh, low battery, I'm in trouble. Hopefully I can just about make it. Yeah, 10%. Okay, keep rolling, scrolling down. And then when everything worked out well, what happened? Keep going. Pasuk 22, there it is, 22. And what we don't need any, well, we do in a minute. We'll come back to that. To remember Pasuk 22, what does he do? He takes out a gold, well, some people say nose ring, it's just a ring, can't be tell whether it's a nose or not. But a bekar mishkolo, ushnei tzemidim al yodeha, 2 golden bands, 2 golden bracelets, right? That's what he gives her, 2 golden bracelets. Now drop down, keep rolling, scrolling, and of course she runs home, and he's got a brother. Stop there. Now, Pasuk 30, she runs home to say, guess who's arrived? And when he saw the bands, tzemidim al yodeha, he sees the ring and he sees the gold bands, the gold bracelets. He runs out, okay? Then this word tzemidim is mentioned a 3rd time. So we've got it in 20, what was it, 22, 30? Scroll down around the 40s. When he's relating the story over, here we are, 43, 40, go down to 44. There we are, 47, please. But there's your tzemidim al yodeha. It appears 3 times. Please note how it's spelled. Hatzemidim, tzadi mem, yud, dalid, yud, mem. There. Come back again to Pasuk 30. When, with the story, was it 30? I think it was. Yes, look how it's spelled there. Yes, tzemidim, tzadi mem, dalid yud mem. Notice the yud's missing. Now go to the first time when a word comes up. Pasuk 20, there it is, 22. Tzemidim again with a yud. Interesting. First time with a yud, second time without a yud, third time with a yud. Now follow, please, the commentary of Rashi on that pasuk. Loading. Ooh. Shnei tzemidim. Why shnei tzemidim? The word for bracelet signifies something joined. Yeah, they joined the tzemidim, a symbol of the 2 tablets of stone. That's why he Davka gave her Shnei Tzemidim. She was going to be the mother of Klal Yisrael, and ultimately looking into the future, talking about the 2 tablets of stone. Asora Zohov Mishkolom. Why was there weight? Asora, this Yud, this 10, a symbol of the 10 commandments written on them. This is what he was giving. This is what Eliezer was giving Rivka. She was going to be the mother of Klal Yisrael that ultimately would receive the 2 tablets and also the 10 commandments of them. It may well be that that Yud in Tzemidim is also another hint at that 10 commandments, as we said, the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments on it. That's what Eliezer is giving Rivka. When she runs home, and if you scroll down again, we don't need it, but when she comes to her brother 40. Lovon. Remember Lovon? And she sees, where are we up to? Oh no, we've gone too far. Remember, it was about, what was the posuk? 30, wasn't it? In 30, the Tzimidim without the Yud, he doesn't see that Yud. He doesn't see the representation of it. That's the point. The Yud, which is also another remez, possible remez for the Aseres HaDibros, and really what that means, these particular items, jewelry handed over, representing the future of Klal Yisrael, he doesn't see that. And that may well be why that Yud is missing there. He doesn't see that. He sees some gorgeous golden bracelets. Yes, a wealthy man, this could be a good thing. Then he runs up after him. Of course, when Eliezer repeats the story, that's the one in Posuk 40, that Yud is back in there because he gave them those items, particularly as a representation of something in the future, which was going to be Rivka being the mother of Klal Yisrael, ultimately receiving the Shtei Luchos together with the Aseres HaDibros on them. All I'm saying is that missing Yud may well be suggestion that that's not what he sees. He just sees the actual gold. But of course, there's much more to it than just gold jewelry that's been handed over to Rivka. There's a lot more significance which he doesn't see, but nevertheless is there. So I just point that out. Interesting difference between those three psukim. So we go back to faces. Interesting point there. You might want to ponder.